Hi, we are recording. Hello again, everybody. Just repeat what I said before, just for posterity's sake when this goes on YouTube. Yeah, so it's going to go up on YouTube and you will get the recording. Yeah, no worries. And yeah, everybody, let me know where you're calling in from. Curious to see where we have represented. We got Mumbai, we got Montreal, we got San Diego. One of the fun things about this job, I get to teach people all over the world. Detroit. And yeah, please let me know if you have audio issues or video issues, or yeah, audio or video issues. Karachi, all right. Alex is saying he has some audio issues, but anybody else, if you are, let me know. Connecticut. Yeah, I still live up there. Spent a good amount of time in the Northeast. Okay. Feel free to keep chiming in with where you're calling from and all that other good stuff. But yeah, my name is Rich Swelling. I am one of the main instructors at TTP, do both GMAT and GRE. Scored a 338, which is Quant 170, perfect 170, yay, and 168 verbal. I want to bump that up, see if I can get that verbal score perfect. And I love teaching people about these problems. It's really fun to see that aha moment when people's lights go, the lights in their eyes go on, and the light bulb pops up, and they really understand this. Makes me feel like I'm doing a good job. I like to consider myself pretty empathetic and warm, kind of be open to teaching students from all different backgrounds, all around the world, different job backgrounds, this, that, the other. So yeah, you'll be in good hands if you take the class with me. So that's what we hope to do, is get you to take the class. And just a quick reminder before we get started about the class. So a little promotional thing here, but used to be $13.99. Now it's going to be $9.99 for the entire class. And with that, you get not just the live classes, but you get a whole 6 months of access to the TTP course, the online course. So it'll be 6 months. And you'll also be able to access a Slack channel that we use to keep in touch. If you wanted to ping me or anything like that, or just ask general questions of TTP, you can use the Slack channel that we'll let you know about. Yep, and I'll be repeating this information at the end of the session, so not to worry. But I wanted to get started doing some stuff with Quant, and specifically statistics. Now, statistics is your stuff with mean, median, mode, standard deviation, stuff like that. And I'm curious as to what kind of experience you guys have had with that already. Do you feel comfortable with it? Not so comfortable? Don't know anything about it? Hate it? Love it? What do you got? Let me know in the chat. Nah, Freya says I like it. So Kanal likes it. Freya's nah, not so comfortable. And yeah, if you would like to chat me privately, please feel free to do so. Yeah. So some people haven't seen it in a while, not so comfortable taking statistics. Yeah. And what we want to show you here is kind of the idea how they like to test statistics, because it's not going to be super in depth. That's not what they're interested in. So if you took a stats class, great. You might have a leg up, maybe not. But it's the way they test the information and the way that they kind of prize reasoning skills over like a lot of specific knowledge. And I kind of wanted to launch into it just to get started. We'll kind of do this together, but here we go. Whoops. No, that's not the one I wanted to start with. There we go. So we got a question something like this. And it says that the average of 9 distinct positive integers is 10. And then it says, you notice, what is the largest possible value of any of the integers? Now, this is interesting to my mind for 2 reasons. It really tests your ability to know what to do with the information they give you, and also how to approach the exact question. Because here they're asking for the largest possible value of any of the integers, right? And so what we're going to see is this is something called what we like to call a min-max problem, where you have to minimize one quantity, maximize another. But let's get the ball rolling and get started here and see what you guys know. And if you don't know this, that's fine. I just want to give an opportunity for people who know. But we're told that the average of 9 distinct positive integers is 10. Now, we don't know what any of those numbers is, but there is information we can actually take away from that. And how many people have seen something like this? And if so, what would we do here? Just with that first sentence. We're not going to go much farther than that right now. Or you can say, I don't know. Some people coming up with the answer already. So I like what I'm seeing in some cases, a few different methods, yeah, but a lot of people forget that, the GRE, when it comes to the math, it's not going to be that advanced. You don't have to know advanced statistics. It's more remembering kind of some of the basics that we learned way back when, right? So we know that the sum of a group of numbers is equal to, or excuse me, rather, let me go back on that. Sorry about that. The average, got ahead of myself, is going to be equal to the sum of a group of numbers. And I'm going to divide that by the number of terms. We know that, add up all the terms, divide by the number of terms, that gives you an average, right? But what a lot of people miss is, by extension, if I rearrange that formula, what that tells me is the average times the number of terms is going to give me the sum. So I just multiplied the denominator there. I took the number of terms and moved it over to the other side. Yeah, and I see some of you have got this right now, right? Some of you are actually cutting right to the solution. But if I know that this sum is equal to the average times the number of terms, that kind of gives me a nice framework to know, okay, well, what am I supposed to do with this? I have 9 positive integers and their average is 10. Well, that means that no matter what the numbers are, they could be a lot of different things. But if the average is 10 and there are 9 terms, that means these numbers have to add to 90. No questions asked, right? So I know that I'm dealing with 10 terms that all add to 90. And so what do I do with that? Okay, well, let's be visual about this. What I like to say is, it doesn't take too much time to actually map all this out. So what I'm doing here is saying I got 10 numbers, right? And I know that they add up to 90. And I want to know the largest possible value of any of the integers, right? Now, that's going to be this number at the end. This is going to be the highest number. And this gets into what we talked about before, which is the whole idea of a max-min problem. So I want to maximize this quantity right here. And the question is, how am I going to do that? Well, if I want to maximize this, I know I've got a set sum, right? This is a constant. 90 is going to be my constant sum. So if I'm going to maximize that quantity at the very right, what else do I need to do? Aha, Freya is saying choose one as my minimum, right? Minimize the other values, Alex says, exactly. So the sum is going to stay constant, but with these other 9 terms that show up here, I'm going to want to minimize them. And we could start very simply by saying, okay, well, I know that it's positive integers. We can't overlook that, right? That means 1 is going to be the smallest number that could go here. Great. What about the others? So Freya's got one idea. We agree with that, disagree? Not sure. Aha. Yeah. Shazaib is if I mispronounce anybody's name, please don't hesitate to tell me. But Shazaib is saying, why not make all the other numbers 1, right? Because if I'm minimizing them, wouldn't I want to make them all 1? Just make everything 1 up to the top. Aha. But Freya's got the point here, right? And this shows you that what the test is often really about. It's not like nitty-gritty calculations or advanced concepts. It's about paying attention to detail. And this question specifically says that the positive integers have to be distinct. And if you miss that, you're not going to get this. So what that means is I actually want to fill out the rest of these and say, well, I've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Oh, wait a minute, sorry, I made 1 extra, my bad. It should be just 1 through 8. So I had 1 extra in there. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then I've got this maximum manager here. So I've minimized all the other quantities. And now I say, okay, well, what's the sum of those? Now, if I look at 1 through 8, I could just add those left to right. I mean, I certainly could do that and I would get it done. But what this test is also about is about numerical literacy and seeing, okay, well, what's the quickest, most efficient way to do something? Now, if I add 1 through 8, I could just do it left to right, but I could also do something a little bit sneakier, which is, what if I go from the outside in? And Thomas has got another way, right? So I could go from the outside in and say, well, isn't this just 1 plus 8 plus 2 plus 7 plus 3 plus 6 plus 4 plus 5? Why does this make things easier? Well, because what I've now got is a bunch of 9s. Going from the outside in allows me to make a bunch of sums that are equal, and I'm just adding that 4 times. So that adds up to 36. Not bad, right? And if that's 36, and I know that everything has to add up to 90 by the end, right? Everything's going to have to add up to 90. That means that my missing number is 54, because 90 minus 36 is 54. So I've just maximized that top number. Pretty nifty, right? Okay, so are there questions about that before we get started? Or before we move on to the next question, excuse me. Yeah, no worries. Next question, please. I like it. Let's move on. So now we're going to do something a little bit different, because now we want to get into quantitative comparisons, right? So this is a big hallmark of the GRE, where you get 2 quantities and you have to say, okay, one's bigger, one is equal to the other, or I can't tell, right? And I got this one, and I got a list of numbers, and this one is about the median. Okay, so what's the deal with median? I mean, when we talk about median, what exactly do we mean? So Freya says middle number, okay? Middle value, okay? Value that's in the middle of the cell. Now, Alan is adding an important detail here. And so is Chioma, yep. Sorting, yeah. Because the danger can be, you got to be very, very careful. Because if I give you a set of numbers like this, 4, 2, 11, 4, and 8, would I say that the median is 11 because it's in the middle of the list? Well, no, because what I have to do first is put them in order. It's the middle of an ordered list, either top to bottom or bottom to top. So if I had like 7, 2, 11, 4, 8, I would first need to put all these numbers in ascending order, and I would realize that the median is actually 7. Or if it's an even number of terms, so if I did something like 2, 4, 7, 9, 11, 13, something like that. So I've got 6 numbers here, and the middle 2 numbers are 7 and 9, right? So I need to find the average of those 2 numbers to get the median. In this case, the median is going to be 8, because 8 is right smack in the middle of 7 and 9. Good. So that's the basics of the median. Perfect. But what's that going to mean for this particular question? Okay, well, let's take a closer look. We know we want to find the median. And let's take a look at all the entries that we have now. We've got 29. We've got a 30. We've got a 30. We've got a 31. We've got a 32. And then we've got these oddballs, right, that we don't really have a place for them right now. So I got X and Y. I don't know exactly where they go. And I know that Y is the smallest value. So at the very least, what I can do is say, all right, well, I know Y is going to be somewhere over here. Okay, so that takes care of y. And that means that now the only real variable that I need to worry about is x, and I don't know what x is. So the question is, what's the median of the set, and how do I compare it to 30? Some people have got a good handle on this, right? But if you're not careful, I mean, what's the tempting answer, like cognitively, when you look at this and you say, I don't know what x is, like I have no idea what x is. What is the tempting answer to pick? This gets into a little of the psychology of the test. So I'm saying not what the correct answer is, but what you might be tempted to pick because we don't know x. Yeah, Bartek says D would be a tempting one, wouldn't it? Absolutely. Because you'd say, okay, well, I don't know x, so answer must be D. I don't know. But that's kind of what they want you to think. It's a little obvious, right? Now, in a different question, that might be the case, but the problem is I have to actually check this out and see what the median of the set would be. And I can do it by moving around x. So I'm going to change the color here so it looks a little bit more distinct. So here's x. Let's say that I put it right here. And you could do this on your scratch work where you're doing the problem. I put it actually before y. There's no other real restriction on x. What would that make the median of the set in this case? Yeah, what's the middle number? I've got 7 terms here. So 30 is right smack in the middle. Okay, so I did that case, and the median was 30. Great, we're off and running. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move that x, and I'm going to say, okay, now I'm going to put it, let's say, right over here. Right smack in the middle. Okay, well, no mystery there, right? If it's in between a 30 and a 30 term, that's going to be another 30, right? So the median is still 30. Or I could take it and, for example, here, I'll move this around here and put it all the way at the end. What's the median now? Hey, what are we noticing, right? It seems that no matter where we put x, even if we don't know what it is, right? The question part of the question, as I like to call it, right? This is the question part, of the question. We want to know about the median. And it appears that no matter where we put x, the median is still going to be 30. So guess what? Believe it or not, even though we don't know what x is, it turns out that the median is always going to be 30. Yeah, and you can come up with like alternate scenarios about how this problem would be different. Sure, like Alan is saying, if we had an even number of integers and 32 was removed, that would completely change the answer, right? But the truth is that these problems are designed in a very specific way for a very specific, almost like psychological purpose. They call it psychometrics, right? They're trying to sucker you into picking D because you don't know what X is. And you got to be on your toes and remember, okay, well, I got to check this out first. I always want to have answer choice D in mind, but I don't want to assume it's just by default the correct answer. Yeah. And if it said numbers instead of integers, that would mean that non-integers would be included, fractions, decimals, things like that. Actually, in this case, for this particular question, if I changed it to numbers instead of integers, I believe it would still be the same. You'd still have 30 because the median would still be 30 regardless. Okay, questions about this one? A lot more like this in the stats lesson. So this is stuff we'll be talking about in depth if we get to the stats lesson before. And I also wanted to show you kind of another example of how they could do questions like this. Now, this is the type of question where, and you will get this one at least once on the GRE, where it might not just be one answer that's the correct answer, but you'll have like 5 or 6 choices and it could be multiple ones. And they say right here, indicate all such answers that are correct, right? So I think what I would like to see you guys do here is give this one a shot on your own, and we'll take a couple minutes. But after you're done, or if you finish early, go ahead and message me privately in the chat. You can use private chat and just tell me what you think the correct answer is. And we'll talk about it in a couple minutes. Good luck. Okay, seeing some answers coming up in the private chat. Nice. And don't worry if you didn't finish this one. I wanted to give you kind of an example of, kind of a harder problem, how it would do this. And also let's talk about how we would get through it a little bit quicker because, okay, I've got this list of numbers and I want the average of the remaining numbers to be less than 25 if I take one out. But first things first, I got to figure out what to do with this list as is. I'm going from 4 to 44. And the interesting thing about this list, and this is kind of a principle you might not have known about, but now it's going to blow your mind if you didn't know about this. And it goes back to what we were doing in the first question, but this is an evenly spaced set, meaning that it's the same distance between adjacent terms, right? I go from 4 to 8, that's an increase of 4. Then I increase by 4 again to get to 12, 4 again to get to 16, and so on and so forth, right? And yes, they're all multiples of 4. But because it's an evenly spaced set, this is a little factoid you can remember, it turns out that the mean and the median are exactly the same. Pretty wild, right? And what is that number? What is the median of this list, which is also the mean? $24, right? 24 is right smack in the middle. How do I know that? Well, I've got 5 terms to the left and 5 terms to the right. There are 11 total terms. But visually, you can look at this and say, okay, well, that must mean 24 is right smack in the middle, right? So I know for a fact that 24 is my mean and median. Great. Now, so what? What does that mean? How does that help us? Ah, you can get the sum. Okay. Yep. Thomas is saying 24 times 11. Now, this goes back to what we did in the first question. Remember, the shortcut you can use is that the sum is equal to the average or the mean of a group of numbers times the number of terms, which in this case means that the sum is 24 times, and I've got 11 numbers. And if I did that, I would get 264. So I know that the sum of the 11 terms is 264. So then I remove a number apparently, and I want the average to be less than 25. So what can I do there? Okay, well, what does that mean? I want the sum of 10 terms that remain to be less than, and what do I got? Average times the number of terms, do it all over again. That's going to be 25 times 10. So I want the sum of the 10 terms to be less than 250. And this is where the synthesis part comes in, right? Because what this means is, okay, I had a sum for sure of 264 at the beginning. I'm going to take away a term and 250. So yeah, Freya, why did it become 10 terms? Because we're actually going to remove a term from the list. Which of the following numbers could be subtracted from the list so that the remaining numbers is less than 25? So I'm going to take one term out. I'm going to be left with 10 terms. And I know that the sum is supposed to be less than 250. Well, if it was 264 before, and now it's going to be less than 250, what exactly does that mean about the number that I removed? So 264 minus 50, excuse me, 250. Now I want it to be less than 25, so it's not going to be or equal to. I know that that is equal to 14. So I want to remove numbers greater than 14. And that's pretty much it. Because then once I know I want to remove numbers greater than 14, guess what? Boom. 16, 20, and 24. Those are my answers. That's what's going to fit here. Pretty wild, right? That formula really comes in handy. The whole idea that, so there's two big takeaways here to my mind. You've got this formula that we've done once already, the idea that sum is equal to average times the number of terms. And also, if you have an evenly spaced set, mean and median are going to be exactly the same, no matter what the evenly spaced set is. Good question. Allison, do you get partial marking if you miss a single correct option? Unfortunately, no. You got to get them all. They don't give partial credit. I'll think about that for you. Not quite sure, but let me think about that and I'll get back to you on that one. Oh, thank you, Thomas. Yes. Okay. So good. Got a lot of quant out of the way. That's good. And I wanted to also do some verbal stuff as well. Obviously, I wanted to focus on some text completion and also on some sentence equivalence. So we good? Questions before we go on? How we doing? This helpful? And yes, lots more like this when we do the course. Awesome. So we will move on, and now we're going to talk about how to tackle a text completion one, because I think a lot of people get tied up by this, especially because of the vocab issue, right? People get scared because they don't know all this vocab, and you do need to study vocab. There's no doubt about it. But at the same time, you also want to get good at using the clues in the sentence to figure out what kind of thing is going to go in the blank. And what you often want to do is see what the relationships are between the blanks, if possible. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. But you can at least look for context clues, and we can say, okay, well, are there any answers we could eliminate that don't make sense based on this? So let's actually pick apart one like this. It says the governor's whatever fell short of outright something. Now, is there any way I can know what is going to go in those blanks right now? No. I mean, and that might happen, right? You read a blank, you don't know what's going to go in there, and you have to read the rest of the sentence to unpack it. But what I can do is say, okay, what is the relationship here? Is there any kind of logical relationship we can establish between 1 and 2? Okay, Tomas has got one idea. Feel free to agree, disagree. Same connotation. Mm-hmm. Ah, yeah, Bartek is saying, but we have a but immediately afterwards. Yep, agree with Thomas. So yeah, let's get this first part out of the way. So what we realize is that, okay, there's a matter of degree here. So the governor is doing something, and then it says fell short. And if it fell short of outright, meaning complete, then it's going to be something stronger, right? Same kind of thing. But it's going to be to a bigger degree. That's something, right? Okay. Alex is saying lean towards slander. Okay. And that could be tempting, right? But here's the thing, and I'm glad you're saying this, Alex. Please throw out your thoughts in there. No harm at all. Because it makes sense, because you've got a politician, and in our real world brains, we're thinking, oh, politicians slander all the time. It makes sense in a real world context. But you got to be very, very careful. Because what we want to do is say, well, what actually reflects the logic of the sentence? What's there? And, okay, now I'm getting some other ones. Okay, now what we want to talk about is what do we see? And we've got this contrast word, as you guys were pointing out. But, so we've got a contrast, and every sentence here is going to express either agreement or contrast. If it's not agreement, it's got to be contrast. And it says equivocal. Now, you do have to know what equivocal means for this. So that's the vocab part. But even if you don't, there are other clues. Because what does it say? We're looking at something that would not satisfy journalists for long. Okay. Well, even if you don't know what equivocal is right off the bat, could you kind of get a sense of what it means if it's not going to satisfy the journalists? Alan's got one idea. Agree, disagree? Yeah. And if it's not satisfying the journalist, pretty good. I like what I'm seeing here. You're saying ambiguous, unclear, vague. Sometimes in a real world context, we like overly diplomatic, maybe, right? But the big part here is ambiguous, unclear, or vague, right? It's not clear. And that's what equivocal means. Equi meaning equal, vocal meaning voice. So what it means in this context is you're kind of talking out of both sides of your mouth. You're not giving a straight answer. That's what we need here. Because all we're trying to do is say that this governor is not being, for lack of a better word, straight up. Not telling the truth, just not being clear and plain with people, waffling maybe. But what do you think about slander now? If I look at slander in blank two. Yeah, it makes sense in a real world context because that's what we're used to. We talk about politicians, like I said, they slander, right? But there's nothing else in the sentence that indicates that the governor is talking bad about somebody, right? Making untrue statements about a person, right? So I don't like slander. And this is important, right? Because you don't want to panic and say, oh, I don't know these words. I don't know what's going on, therefore I can't do it. No, you can cross off slander and any other word that you know. We got mendacity, we got misnomer. Well, what do you think? Any of these don't fit? Testing, testing. Misnomer, Shazayab is saying, used for misrepresentation. And going back to the first blank, which will get you into mirroring. Yep. As far as you know, yeah. Yeah. Alex says, yeah, you misnamed something. Yeah, a misnomer is an incorrect name. Right? So it's the wrong name used to describe something. And again, at the least what we could do is say, well, remember, don't make the answer work too hard. I see a lot of people trying to say, oh, it could be correct, but does the answer, or excuse me, does the question reflect it? No, we're not talking about an incorrect name. So it's got to be mendacity, even if I don't know offhand what mendacity means. And again, what I could do is go back and say, okay, I know that this governor is not being straight up, right? Not necessarily telling the truth. So the first blank may be a little bit tougher, right? If you know the words, great, but are there any that we can look at and pretty clearly say, no, not going to work? Yeah, probably the most common one, the one that most people would be familiar with, is explicate, because what does explicate mean? Yeah, just to kind of relate information or explain something right at length. That's not what we're talking about, right? That wouldn't fit with the idea that she's being equivocal, right? Then it gets a little bit trickier because you have to know what these other two words mean. But the point is that we want to get down to as close to the correct answer as possible. And yeah, so what does prevaricating mean? Somebody said this earlier. It is kind of a synonym for equivocal, isn't it? Prevaricating means, and it's actually, equivocal could just mean that you are talking out of both sides of your mouth, you're not being straight up. But prevaricating is a little bit stronger than that because it means you're not telling the full truth. You're kind of dancing around the truth. Baiting around the bush, Alan says. Yep. Whereas demurring means you cast doubt on something. And again, there's nothing in the sentence that supports that for the context. So now we've got our degree measurement here. We know blank 2 is a matter of degree. It's a stronger degree than prevaricating, which means not telling the full truth. So what does mendacity actually mean? Why is it a stronger word? Couldn't have said it better. Tomas has got this, right? Yeah, it means straight up lying. Yeah, not just dancing around the truth or this and that. I mean, mendacity means you are just intently going out there and telling falsehoods. You are lying. Little vocab for the day, right? But again, the overall theme I'm getting at here is that even if you don't know all the vocab, you can still get some of these by thinking logically about the sentence. And that's what you want to train yourself to do as much as possible. Yep, superlative. Yep. Yeah. And like I said, don't panic. I mean, some people know this, some people don't, but you do want to beef up on your vocab, and the GRE, or excuse me, the TTP course does have flashcards for you to do. You do want to beef up on your vocab. I also recommend reading regularly, even if it's just an article a day in some advanced publication, something like Scientific American, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, The Economist, Smithsonian, stuff like that. Okay, Alan's got a recommendation there. But nice. I mean, yeah, that was a good way to kind of go through this. And now let's go and switch gears a little bit, because I also want to take a look at some sentence equivalents. Okay, so actually, which one do I want to start with? Let's see. Yeah, let's do this one. So this is where you're just going to get one blank, and you've got 6 words, right? And you have to choose exactly 2. It's always going to be exactly 2, so don't mistake this, right? And the 2 have to give you the same meaning in the context of the sentence, but the process is much the same with text completion. You want to actually look at the context of the sentence to see what sort of logical markers do I have that could tell me what's going to happen here. Okay, so let's examine this a little bit closer and tell me what you guys notice. I'll let you guys chime in. I like what Shazab is saying, right? We're not getting to the answer quite yet. So Shazab is doing something nice and saying, hey, let's just examine the relationship before and after the comma. Yeah. Okay, Alex has got one idea. Contrast to large quantities. And we've got the semicolon here, as Alex is pointing out, right? Semicolon, and that means that we're going to have, unless we have a contrast word of some case, we don't have a contrast, so it's got to be agreement of some case. Yep. It would be one thing if the semicolon happened and then said however or but, giving us a clear contrast word, but we don't have that here. Yeah, good. Shazai was saying it's not going to be eliminated, so it will exist. Wait, we can't completely eliminate it. And notice that it says completely eliminating it. So that means 0%, just getting rid of it entirely. Alex has got one idea. Yep. And what sort of other markers do we have in here? Well, it says that this stuff, this toxic element, Shazai says the semicolon tells us the amount we could work with. So it produces deleterious or harmful, it's a good word, effects only when consumed in large quantities. Okay, that's not there for no reason. They don't mention the large quantities part for no reason. Because even though it does signal agreement of some kind, now we have a little bit of a contrast situation here, right? So it's harmful only when it's in large quantities. Well, if that's the case, let's be straightforward about this, right? What does that mean is going to go in that blank? Something that means what? Yeah. For us, Alan, right on the money. Small, right? Seems kind of silly when you look at it hindsight 2020, right? But if it says large and it's harmful in large quantities, that means that small amounts of it are permitted in foods, or minute. Yeah. That's it. And that makes things easier because then we can look at the answer choices and say, okay, which two actually produce the closest meaning to that when we talk about small, especially considering that we don't want it to be harmful, right? Thoughts? So we got trivial, which means unimportant, like not very impactful, right? It's not a big deal, and negligible, right? Now, notice that I think it's interesting to point out that these two words are not exact synonyms. I mean, if you get two synonyms and they fit, that's great, but they don't have to be exact synonyms. But they do have to mean the same thing in the context of the sentence, right? A negligible amount means it's an amount that doesn't matter that much, it's super small. Trivial amount, unimportant, right? Not that small. Now, this is what I wanted to get to next. Shazib is asking a very good question here. Why not benign? Okay. Anybody else wondering about that? Feel free to, yeah, be honest. Yeah. You want to be exact, like razor sharp, exact as to what the meaning is supposed to be. Yeah. Benign means that it's not harmful. Like you've maybe heard in context of benign tumor. If somebody gets a benign tumor, that's good news if you have a tumor because that means it's not harmful. You can deal with it pretty easily. It's not, yeah, it's not going to be harmful necessarily. Shiv is saying, should you look for synonym pairs? I would, keeping in mind, of course, like I said, that the two correct words might not be exact synonyms. So think of it less in terms of synonyms and more in terms of they produce the same meaning in the context of the sentence, right? So benign is problematic for two reasons. Benign just means not harmful, but doesn't mean small. And we want small. We want the exact meaning here, right? Also, if you think about it logically, there's kind of a problem here with the phrase benign amounts. I want to say that, you know, the toxic element itself is going to be benign in this situation, but I don't know about amounts. That doesn't quite make sense. And the other thing is the word benign doesn't have a match. We don't have a match in this. And if it doesn't have a match, it can't be correct. Not even just a synonym, but we don't have another word that means the exact same thing. Now we do have two words that could kind of go together, and this could be the trap. You want to match answer choices together if you can, but you got normal and typical mean kind of the same thing. But again, it's not what we want. We want something that means small, not normal. There's nothing to indicate that we're talking about typical or normal, like everyday events. And of course, no match for natural. Good. Questions about that? Hopefully that was helpful. So let's try a few of these. Text completion and sentence equivalence. Let's try a few of them on your own. See if I can pick the one that I want to do next. Nah, that one might be a little bit too much right now. Did that one. Did not do that one. Sorry about that. Okay. Well, yeah, let's do this one then. No problem. And again, it's a little bit tougher because we got 3 blanks. But again, try to go through it and see if you can narrow down some answers. And you don't necessarily have to attack the first blank first. It could be that the meaning's not unlocked until the end. All right, good luck. A couple minutes. All right. I see some good work going on. Some people texting me in the chat privately, and I like what you guys are saying. Now, what I really like about what you guys are doing is you guys are being a little cautious, right? You went with something, then you went back and looked at it and like, oh, wait a minute. Something is throwing me off here, right? I might have to go back and re-examine this, which is exactly what you should do. It's a tightrope walk to walk between doing that and making sure you don't take so much time. But you can always leave a question behind, right? You can flag it and leave it behind to do later. That said, how many people, I'm curious, went after a blank other than the first one to start with? In other words, we didn't tackle the first blank first. We went over something else. Anybody do that? All right, seeing some yeses. Freya says the second one. Somebody said the third one. Okay. Yeah, I could see either the second or third one doing pretty well here as far as attacking them, right? So I'm just going to pick at random, right? It's fine if you did either the second or the third, but let's just look at the second, right? Now, we got a context clue here for sure in that, getting my highlighter going, this is unfortunate that the film so thoroughly did something to a message, and it is imperative for the public to connect with, right? So imperative means that it is necessary, right? We've got to connect with the audience on this, on the public, right? Well, if that's the case and something unfortunate happened, then what happens? So thoroughly blank a message, what would we put in that second blank if we're trying to come up with something on our own? It could be a very simple word or phrase. Any takers? Well, if it's a message that is necessary to get to the public and something unfortunate happened, right? We could say something like, it could be as simple as saying thoroughly made it harder to understand. I mean, something as simple as that, right? You don't have to come up with just a single word. It could be a short phrase, but something simple so you know what you're looking for, right? And then I can look at the second blank and say, which one means make harder to understand? Well, yeah, some as you were saying, it was obscures. Makes harder to understand. Quite the opposite of the other two. This is a clear one where we can say, okay, clarifies, that makes easier to understand, or epitomizes, it's like the best example of something, right? Quite the opposite of what we want. We want a negative word. So that one's out of the way. We know we go with obscures. And then we go to the third one and we say, okay, the social class reforms, blank by the filmmaker, reforms equally supported. Ah, okay. So we know that these are supported. So how does that help us unlock that third blank? Sis or Sissy, or if I mispronounce the name, let me know. Want to give credit. Yeah, they both support it. So I want something that matches, right? And it can be just as simple as saying that the social class reforms supported, right? I just throw the word supported in there again. And that makes that one easier to pick apart because advocated, right? If you advocate for something, that means you're for it, you champion it, right? Quite the opposite of censured, which means that you want to actually, punish somebody or kind of scold them. And overturned? No. Going forward, right? So you can attack 2 and 3, but then what you want to do is be very, very careful about how you attack the first one, because it can be tempting, again, to go with something that sounds good in a real world context. But I got to go by the context of the sentence. And some of you pointed this out. Where is the biggest clue in this sentence as to what the first blank is going to be? Tomas has got one idea. Yep. Don't forget that even if you have the first blank at the beginning, the clue for it might come at the end. And in this case, it's about being overly instructional, right? So I saw some people initially say abstruse, right? Abstruse is another synonym for hard to understand, which sounds great, right? It's tempting at the beginning, but the problem is it doesn't mean what we want it to mean. We want something that means overly instructional. That's not going to be abstruse. right? Circuitous means, goes all over the place. It's roundabout. That's no good. So even if you don't know what didactic means offhand, you know it's going to be the correct answer. And didactic does actually mean overly instructional. Often used in a negative context, right? So if you instruct somebody, if you teach somebody, that's not negative by itself. But if you do it too much, it becomes too formal, or you're just going too much into instructional things without any interaction, for example, that's didactic. So hopefully that gives like a better picture of, how the harder questions get hard, not just the vocab, but how they structure the sentence such that you have to pick apart different parts and notice the connection between the blanks. Good. Questions, comments, concerns? Smart remarks, life musings. Brilliant. So now I'm going to get that promotional thing back up. Got to do some of the plugging, right? Glad it helps. And there's much more of that to come if you take the class, which I will start this Tuesday. So this coming Tuesday, I will be starting this class. Again, got a discount, $999 for the entire class, but not just the class. You also get the self-study course materials for 6 months. Used to be just 10 to 12 weeks, I think. Now it is 6 months, right? We also have a dedicated Slack channel, right? So you can contact us via chat. And what I like to do is offer you guys the links that you need. I'm going to throw that into the chat right now. You can copy those. I'll also be sending this out to you guys. But you got the registration page. You got the different plan options. Yep. So yeah, go and register. Anybody going to be registering? Just curious. Anybody? Will I see you got anybody I'm going to be seeing on Tuesday? I wait with bated breath. Yeah, I'll stick around for a little bit. Yeah, so good question. The course is, so it's 40 hours, but it's 20 sessions. So it's twice a week. So that's 10 weeks. And it'll be a little bit longer because we'll have some holiday breaks in here. We're not going to be teaching on Thanksgiving. There's going to be a few classes off in December, but it's going to go to, I believe, the beginning of February, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe a little bit past that. Yeah, and you will be able to watch this on YouTube. They're going to put it up on YouTube. All right, so you got those links. And yeah, let me ask a couple questions. So Tomas is saying absolute value of x is equal to absolute value of y. Well, that means that, I guess the difference between those two things. So Thomas, you're saying absolute value of x equals absolute value of y. Now, what that means is one of two things. Either x is equal to y, or they're negatives of each other. Just typing that in the chat there, right? But if I say that the absolute value of x is equal to just y, well, the difference here is that y must be non-negative. In other words, 0 or positive. So I don't have as many options, right? In the first option, it's possible that y is negative. And yeah, the course consists of both quant and verbal. But it's not one or the other. You got to do both. Facetious, yeah. Facetious means in jest, like in joking or not very serious, right? An offhanded remark is facetious if it's not meant to be taken too seriously, it's lighthearted or not serious. Okay. Doesn't have to be negative for you. So, a facetious remark, I mean, it could be negative. It's kind of more of a neutral word. sometimes it's positive because it means it's something that is used to kind of break tension or lighten the mood a little bit. So not automatically negative. Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, have a good rest of the day, everybody. Glad you guys tuned in, and hopefully I will see some of you on Tuesday. Take care.